They seated me by the trash can. That's how the night began, and how the old story of my family finally cracked. On a rooftop threaded with string lights and soft jazz, my brother lifted his glass and told a joke about family only, and 20 people laughed as if humiliating me were another course on the menu. I smiled the smile that hides fire and walked to the fold-out chair like a ghost choosing its corner. It turns out there is a sound to breaking. It is a heartbeat, getting very calm while the world around you performs joy. I was born into a house that photographed better than it lived. In pictures, we were all open smiles and tidy sweaters, the kind of family who lined church potlucks with casseroles and posed on porches that smelled like lemon cleaner. Inside, there was a ladder. My brother Jacob, with his easy charm and light hair, stood on the top rung, adored by a mother who softened rules into excuses, and a father who saw in him a mirror that flattered his pride. I was the dependable daughter, the scaffolding no one admires until it's gone. Steady hands packing lunches, tutoring through barely passed classes, selling my weekends to overtime when the car insurance jumped after Jacob scraped a fender and forgot to mention it. They called me when the wheels wobbled, not when the cake came out of the oven. I told myself it was love, just misshapen. When my college acceptance letter came with a scholarship, my father clapped my shoulder once and changed the subject to Jacob's new girlfriend. I tucked the sting into the same drawer where I kept birthday reminders for relatives. My mother forgot, and the habit hardened. They asked, I provided. They fell, I paid. They forgot, I remembered. I kept believing inclusion had a price, and that one day I would finally be invited to sit in the light if I covered the tab for long enough. So when my mother called in a voice sugared for favors and told me Jacob and Sophia were having an engagement dinner, I agreed to help with the reservation before she reached the part about paying me back. We both knew those words were decorative. I booked a private rooftop, chose menus that pretended we belonged there, and handed over a $700 non-refundable deposit under a last name that sounded fancier in the hostess's mouth than it ever had in ours. I imagined the night like balm, my mother bragging about my thoughtfulness, my father clinking my glass, my brother saying thank you without smirking. Fantasies, I've learned, are most dangerous when they sound reasonable. On the evening itself, I arrived at 7 p.m. because punctuality is the one virtue my family never tried to reorder. I'd curled my hair and fastened my grandmother's earrings the way you wear small armor. The restaurant glowed like a postcard with the city spread beyond the railings, as if the skyline were applauding us. I carried a bottle of champagne and a card with their initials pressed in silver, the kind of gesture that looks heavy in photographs and feels light in a hand grown used to giving. The hostess led me through linen and laughter to the private section, where my family was already leaning close over their cocktails as though they'd been cast in a commercial. No one saw me until Jacob did. He turned with the smirk he loves and jutted his finger toward the corner past the warm spill of the main table to a lonely fold-out next to a stainless bin that whispered and smelled faintly of the night's peelings. "Sorry, this table's for family only," he said, and a ripple of laughter moved across faces that have known mine since I had baby teeth. I felt the old training push up my throat. Don't make a scene, keep your chin smooth. Carry the embarrassment like a secret. But something colder slid into its place. I set the champagne down by the fold-out chair and smoothed my dress as if choosing exile were a kind of elegance. A waiter brought me water with the careful uncertainty of a man who has watched a story begin and cannot tell yet if it is tragedy or comedy. From my corner, I watched the toasts, the ring flashing like a lighthouse over a sea I'd never been invited to sail. My father told me not to look so serious. My mother shaped the words, "lighten up," without sound. Sophia laughed at a whisper I couldn't hear. The band shifted into a brighter tune. Plates arrived. None arrived for me. I counted the minutes the way you count breaths through a cramp and listened to my heartbeat steady itself into a decision. It took until dessert for the night to show its true face. The waiter approached the main table with a leather folder, paused, and glanced at his notes. Then he walked toward my corner, and the room so full of music a moment before went thin and quiet. He spoke softly, but every head turned with his words. The total he said was $5,200. Should he run it on the same card I'd used for the deposit? 20 pairs of eyes swung from him to me. Jacob leaned back, draped in entitlement, and said what he has always said. Without words, Emily's got it. The old story waited wide-mouthed, ready to swallow me one more time. I stood. The waiter wavered, the leather folder hovering. My voice came out steady and strange, like discovering a door in a room I'd lived in for years. Not my table, I said. For a heartbeat, even the trumpet forgot itself. Jacob blinked, his grin tightening. What he said too loud, trying to summon the usual script where I'd apologize and fix everything. I let my voice grow stronger, every syllable deliberate. Not my table. I was told this one's for family only. The silence that followed was electric. Sophia's mother gasped softly. My father shifted in his chair, clearing his throat as though the air itself had turned to glass. My mother's eyes darted between us, lips pressed into that familiar warning line. Don't do this, Emily. Don't ruin the picture. But the picture had been ruined long before I spoke. Jacob laughed, forced and sharp. Come on, Em, don't be dramatic. It's just a joke. Pay the bill and we'll call it even. Even. The word landed like an insult. I stepped closer, my heels clicking against the rooftop floor, each sound cutting through the stunned quiet. Even I said, and felt something inside me ignite. I paid the deposit. I called 3 restaurants until I found one with a rooftop view because you wanted it. I arranged the date around your football schedule. I ordered real flowers because Mom said fake ones would look cheap in photos. I did all of that, and where did you put me? I pointed to the folding chair by the trash bin, right there. For a long second, no one moved. The music kept playing soft and careless, as if refusing to acknowledge the explosion. Then I laughed, not the polite kind, but a low trembling sound that startled even me. So you think I'm dramatic, I said. No, I'm done. I didn't eat, I didn't drink. I wasn't welcome, so I won't be paying. The waiter hesitated, eyes flicking to my father for direction. My father sat up straighter, his tone heavy with command. Emily, don't make this worse. You already paid for half, you might as well finish it. Half. That was all I'd ever been. Half seen, half respected, half loved, but expected to give everything. My voice shook, but not from fear. You're right, I said. I did pay for half. I always do. The mortgage when you fell behind. Jacob's tickets when he swore he'd handle it. Every time something needed fixing, I gave more than half. And tonight you showed me exactly what that means to you. It means nothing. Jacob's face flushed. You're making a scene, he hissed. But I didn't care. No, I said quietly. I'm finally drawing a line. I turned to the waiter, my tone steady now. I won't be paying. Not this time. Not ever again. A few gasps fluttered through the table. Sophia's father frowned, glancing at Jacob with disbelief. Sophia's glass trembled slightly in her hand. My mother looked at me like she was watching her control slip away one word at a time. I picked up my clutch, my hands no longer shaking. Enjoy your family dinner, I said, and walked past them, past their stares, their half-eaten meals, the string lights that no longer looked warm but artificial. The elevator doors closed behind me, sealing off the applause that never came. By the time I reached my apartment, the quiet felt holy. Then my phone lit up, a text from Jacob. Seriously, you couldn't just pay the bill and talk to me after you embarrassed me in front of Sophia's family. Grow up. I tossed the phone onto the counter, but it buzzed again, Mom this time. Sweetheart, I don't know what got into you. You made us look bad. Sophia's parents were horrified. I stared at the screen. Not guilt rage, a deep, clean kind that burns without shame. Then the phone rang again, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press accept. Emily. It was Sophia. Her voice was soft, uncertain. I just wanted to ask, did you really pay for everything? The deposit, the flowers, all of it. I sank onto the couch. Yes. They asked, and I said yes. I didn't do it for attention. I just wanted to be included. Silence filled the line. Then she whispered, "My dad thought you volunteered. He's furious. He said Jacob and your parents made him look like a fool." I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "You don't need to be," she replied. "They do." When the call ended, I sat in the dim light of my apartment, heart pounding with a strange new rhythm, freedom. The world hadn't ended. The roof hadn't fallen. I had said no, and the sky stayed where it was. I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. By morning, the family group chat was on fire. "Dad, apologize, Emily, and let's move on. Mom, please call us. We need to fix this before it ruins everything. Jacob. You owe me. Fix this now." I stared at the messages unread and blinking like tiny alarms. Then I set the phone down. No reply. That afternoon, one of Jacob's friends, the rare one who'd always been decent to me, called to tell me what happened next. Sophia's dad lost it at brunch, he said. Told Jacob, "If that's how you treat your own sister, how will you treat my daughter?" I almost laughed, a quiet, shaking laugh that felt like justice exhaling. For once, someone else saw it. The cracks in Jacob's perfect image were beginning to show, and I hadn't needed to lift a finger. The cracks widened faster than I imagined. 2 days after the dinner, Sophia called again. Her voice no longer carried the glossy confidence from the rooftop. It sounded thin, careful. "I talked to the restaurant manager," she said. "He showed me the invoices. You paid for everything, the flowers, the deposit, even the seating arrangements. Jacob told me you insisted on it. He said you're shy that you chose to sit apart, that you left early because of a work call." I could almost hear the world tilting in her silence. "None of that's true," I said quietly. He lied, and my parents backed him up. Her breath wavered through the line. "I know," she whispered. "My dad's furious. He says Jacob humiliated you and deceived us. He told me marrying into that family would be a mistake." There it was, the sentence that cracked the crown on my brother's head. I didn't feel triumphant, just hollow. "He's not wrong," I said. Sophia sighed. "I'm sorry, Emily. You didn't deserve that." "I know," I said. "But thank you for saying it." By the end of the week, the engagement unraveled. Sophia returned the ring. Her father canceled the venue, the vendors, everything. It was as if the wedding had never existed. When Jacob texted me that morning, the tone was no longer smug. "Sophia's gone. Her dad canceled everything. Fix this, Emily, please." I didn't reply. That evening, he called voice breaking between panic and fury. "You can't just abandon me like this. I need help money for rent for dinners with Sophia. She might give me another chance if I can prove myself." I let the silence stretch. Then evenly, "Jacob, you told me I wasn't family. You don't get to use my money if I'm not even allowed at the table." He sputtered, switching gears. "You're jealous, admit it. You've always hated that Mom and Dad loved me more." And for the first time in years, I laughed. Not bitterly, not defensively, just clean, startled laughter. No Jacob. I said I hated that I let it go on for so long. I hung up hands, trembling, not with anger, but release. That night, I logged into the old joint account my parents had convinced me to open for Jacob, just until he got back on his feet. It was still active. He'd been using it for his gym membership, for streaming subscriptions, for takeout. I moved the remaining few $1,000s into my private account, then called the bank and closed it for good. When the email confirmation arrived, I exhaled like I'd set down a weight I'd carried for decades. The next morning, my phone exploded 6 missed calls before breakfast. On the 7th, I answered. "What did you do?" Jacob's voice cracked through the line. I closed it, I said simply. You can't. I can. And I did. My tone stayed calm, almost gentle. You wanted me out of the family. Congratulations. I'm out, and so is my money. There was a pause long enough to hear him realize the world had shifted. For once, Jacob had no script. You'll regret this, he muttered before hanging up. But I didn't. Not once. Word spread fast. Friends who used to orbit his charm stopped returning calls. Sophia blocked him. My parents tried to patch the mess with long, sugar-dipped emails about misunderstandings, about forgiveness, about how family must stick together. I read them all and felt nothing. Not anger, not guilt, just distance, like listening to an old song I no longer knew the lyrics to. A week later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, my mother stood there smaller than I remembered, holding a glass dish of lasagna, like it was a treaty. Her eyes were swollen, makeup faded. Hi, sweetheart, she said softly. I didn't move aside, so she stepped forward, hesitantly perching at my kitchen table like a guest, unsure if she was welcome. I just wanted to talk. No excuses. I folded my arms. Just talk, I said. She nodded, twisting the lasagna lid. I owe you an apology. Her voice broke on the last word. Probably more than one. We leaned on you for too long. We treated you like scaffolding, something always there to hold everything up. And Jacob, she sighed, tears pooling. We let him treat you like less. I didn't want to see it, but I see it now. I stayed quiet. For once, I didn't rush to smooth the edges of her guilt. I let her sit in it. After a moment, she whispered, I know a lasagna and a sorry can't fix years of imbalance, but I needed you to know you deserved better. My throat tightened, not with forgiveness, but with something that might someday become it. I nodded once. Thank you. She didn't ask me to call Jacob. She didn't beg me to fix the engagement. She simply stood, touched my shoulder lightly, and said, Take care of yourself. Then she left. When the door closed behind her, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to pull me back into the same old pattern. I was free. The days that followed felt strangely weightless, like walking through a house after all the furniture's been cleared. For the first time in years, I wasn't juggling someone else's crisis or calculating how much of myself I could afford to give away. I woke up without dread. I made coffee because I wanted to, not because someone else needed the pot ready. In the quiet, I began to notice how exhaustion had carved itself into me, how I'd learned to mistake responsibility for love. I started small. I booked a trip to Spain, a dream I'd postponed for nearly a decade, because someone always needed something first. I bought noise-canceling headphones and began devouring books about boundaries, about families that confuse sacrifice with devotion, about women who stop apologizing for taking up space. Each page felt like a mirror being wiped clean. I found a therapist, not because I was broken, but because I was finally ready to understand why I'd stayed small for so long. One afternoon, weeks later, I walked past a cafe where a family was laughing over coffee, the mother swatting at her son's arm in mock scolding. For a moment, I felt that old tug of longing, the wish to belong, to be part of something warm and easy. But it passed. I realized belonging had never been my problem. I'd belonged my whole life to a version of family that only worked because I stayed invisible. What I wanted now wasn't belonging. It was peace. Occasionally, my phone buzzed with updates from relatives, a cousin's wedding invitation, a photo of my parents at church, Jacob absent. Rumor had it he'd moved in with a friend after Sophia broke off contact. I didn't feel satisfaction. Revenge wasn't the point. What mattered was that I hadn't lifted him this time when he fell. I let gravity do its work. A few months later, as autumn folded into winter, I stood at my apartment window watching the first flakes drift down. My reflection in the glass didn't look different, but it felt different. softer, steadier. I thought about that rooftop night, the laughter, the folded chair, the smell of leftovers beside my seat, and realized it had never been humiliation. It had been a beginning, the moment I stopped mistaking endurance for loyalty. People like to think family bonds are unbreakable, but I learned the truth: they bend until they either heal or snap. Mine snapped, and in the sound of it, I heard freedom. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be on my terms. Not as a favor, not as an obligation, but as a choice. When Thanksgiving arrived, my mother sent a polite text, "Dinner at 6 p.m. if you'd like to join us." No expectations, no guilt, just words hanging there like an open door. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Maybe, I'll let you know." And for the first time, that felt like enough. That evening, instead of packing a pie or rushing to help set a table that never had space for me, I lit a candle on my own dining table. I set out one plate, one glass, one meal I'd made exactly the way I liked it. The quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt honest. I thought about the line I'd drawn that night, the one between who I'd been and who I was becoming. It wasn't anger that kept it in place, but clarity. I wasn't punishing them by stepping away. I was honoring myself by staying gone. Healing, I realized, isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's saying no without guilt. It's letting silence answer texts that don't deserve replies. It's understanding that love without respect is just dependence in disguise. Maybe someday I'll sit at a family table again, but not as their fixer or their scapegoat. I'll sit because I want to, not because I owe them another piece of myself. And if they can't accept that, then the distance will stay. I can live with that. As the candlelight flickered against the window, I raised my glass to peace, to boundaries, to the small, defiant act of choosing myself after a lifetime of being chosen last. I smiled, not the kind that hides fire, but the kind that finally lets it warm you. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us to stand tall even when the people closest to us can't see our worth. And tell me in the comments, have you ever drawn a line that changed everything?